Hey everyone, Dylan here from AYCB.
I'm Carlo.
And today we're going to be giving you our first impressions on My City. Now this is a little bit of a different format. Normally it's just one of us on camera and we're just kind of speaking to you. We thought we'd change it up, and this time we don't have a full review for you yet. That's something that's going to be forthcoming. I'll have for you as soon as we've played through the entire Legacy component. But for now, we thought we would just get on camera, the two of us, and have a conversation and let you guys be a part of it, and kind of give you what we think of the game so far, how it's playing for us, and just bring you into that conversation with us. We're going to be trying some more of these videos going forward, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let us know in the comments if you do. If you have any other suggestions, we're completely open to it. This is our first time delving into this. So yeah, My City. This was a game that obviously I'm a huge Reiner Knizia fan. I know Carlo, you are too. And you know, I have Lost Cities, which is a huge favorite of mine, and El Dorado, which is another really big favorite of mine. So I had a lot of high hopes coming into this one just from the name, the designer alone. But the fact that it's a legacy game, and with sort of, I don't want to say simplistic. I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to just be like, this is a super simplistic game. But it's not like you're going into Pandemic Legacy where it's this overarching story and all these different aspects and things. It's a just bare bones concept that sort of builds itself as you go, which I think is so interesting. We had a discussion where we were sort of debating, you know, how did they come up with the idea of this? Was it the full game is what you end up with, and they came up with that first, and then they deconstructed it into all the chapters? So it's like they took their full concept, deconstructed it down to the very bare bones, and had that be where you start? Or did they come up with the bare bones concept first and say, how can we take it one step further? How can we take it one step further? And we talked about that a lot, just because that alone is super interesting to think how they crafted it. But I don't know how you felt about it. I'll let you speak to that. But like my first impressions on this, having played I think we played 10 scenarios.
Yeah, 10 out of the 24.
10 out of 24. It's spread across I don't know how many chapters. It's 8 chapters. Spread across 8 chapters. Carlo's going to be my fact checker. I'm just going to constantly be double checking with him. So 8 chapters, and there's multiple games in each chapter. So we've played through 10 of them, which is almost half. So again, we're about halfway through to giving our full review because we want to play everything. My first impressions are, anytime I think about playing a board game, it's the first thing in my mind that I want to go back to now that we're right in the middle of this. I find it super, super fun, super, super intriguing. I'm a huge fan of polyominoes as it is. I know we both are. We have tons of different games like Patchwork and Spring Meadow and Isle of Cats you have as well that have this aspect. So I think we're big fans of that as it is. But the way that My City does it is so simple, but you're always I don't even know the best way to describe it. It's simple, and yet there's so much depth there in terms of what you can do, what you can accomplish. I don't know, how would you describe it?
It feels like any of the Reiner Knizia games I've played, which is where it's really simple rule set. You're kind of maybe just a couple pages of rules. Once you learn the rules, you'll probably never forget them again. But every game, it's like every single decision you make feels like there's a lot of weight to it. I still, even knowing kind of the pedigree he has for those types of games, I still didn't know what to expect and was still expecting something a little lighter, because it is basically, I don't know if it's necessarily billed this way, but I've heard it, before we got it, sounded kind of like a gateway or family style legacy game, a way to have and it kind of comes at the perfect time with COVID. Obviously, there's a lot of people kind of just being able to play games just at home with their family. Yeah. So I was expecting something that was maybe going to be more on the accessible side, but maybe on the lighter side than we'd like. Especially when you I saw these pictures online. It's just a board with these yellow, red, and blue polyomino shaped pieces, and it just looked so simple and bare. But I was like, okay, so it's his first polyomino game and his first legacy game, and I kept hoping I hope it's not one of those ones where I just feel like I'm being, strung along for the ride to what's going to happen later in the legacy, but not enjoying it as much. But for us in this, from the very first game, I loved it. Totally caught me off guard. One of the things I want to talk about is the fact that it kind of has an aspect that reminds you of kind of a roll and write game because the way the game works is essentially each player has a board. You're going to be flipping. There's a deck of cards that basically at the start of every turn you'll flip a card, and both players will take that tile from their reserve and place it on their board somewhere. So each player has the same 24 tiles, I think it is, right? There's the 3 colors and 8 of each.
Yep.
So it's the same 8 tiles in 3 different colors, but there's only 1 of each of these cards in the deck. So we're playing simultaneously. We flip over the same card. We both have to place the same tile. And I remember at first we're looking at each other's boards to be like, was that the best place for mine? Why did he place his there? Okay, whatever. And, after a few turns, you start seeing the boards kind of diverge from themselves. And I going back to the roll and write comparison I was making, in a roll and write, you're rolling the dice, doing something, you might get the same result. It's totally luck-based. You can't really expect what numbers you're going to roll throughout the whole game. But because of this, you have the deck. You know exactly which 24 cards are in there and how many of each type of tile there is, right? So you can kind of plan a little bit more because it's not like you're going to get the same tile over and over. Once you've used it once, okay, I only have 2 of those same shapes left, and now they're in different colors. And because without spoiling much, but there's like, different rewards for matching up colors or where you put stuff together. So I just like that aspect of there's a bit of the randomness of not knowing what order they're coming up in, but you can still set a long-term plan because ultimately you know what you're dealing with. And let's say you use all 3 of your same shape tile, you don't have any more of those left. Or if you're leaving spaces, you're looking at, okay, I've got how many that can even fit in there later. So I just really like that aspect of being able to plan ahead.
Yeah, and I should mention as well, obviously with this being a legacy game, there are spoiler elements. We won't get into any that we might allude to or touch on some things that if you're really looking to go in 100% blind, keep in mind you might get little hints. We're not going to blatantly say, oh, in chapter 4 you unlock this. So don't worry, we're not going to spoil anything for you. One thing I do want to mention is the first time we played, I don't know if you had this feeling as well, the concept is very simple, like Carlo's saying. So you're literally flipping over a card, and it is saying, place this tile, and both players are placing the same tile on their board. And I remember thinking, it's in that way almost similar to kind of Second Chance, where you flip over, flip over, I think, 2 options in that one, and you can draw one.
Right.
But it felt like it was even more strict than that. I remember thinking, where's the variety going to come from? Like, we are both playing the exact same thing, where there's no divergences. We could end up just playing, like, it seemed like there was barely anything to go off. And I remember thinking, okay, I know I'm not going to worry. It's a Reiner Knizia game. I'm going to get drawn in by something. I just have to understand what it is. And you definitely do. It's definitely not as like it's that simple to start, but it really is just the foundation of what this game has to offer that it's introducing to you, and then it's really just opening the doors wide for you to explore all kinds of things. But I think that's what's so genius about it is the games that tend to draw me in or be super successful in drawing me in and remain in my collection long term, and I want to keep playing, are the ones that can take such a simple concept in terms of teaching it, in terms of learning the game, in terms of just execution, getting a game done in 15 minutes, whatever. But there's the entire other layer that you either learn right from the start or you learn through multiple plays, that all of a sudden there's tons of strategy, and now you can pull off that amazing move that just really swings the game and stuff like that. Like that all exists here, but you're going to be able to sit down and basically learn how to play and even play a game all within an hour easily, and after the first play, you're going to be getting through games sometimes in 20 to 30 minutes. And I think that's the thing that caught my attention. That's what made us want to keep playing. Every time we've sat down to play this, I mean, how many games have we played? Like,
We've only had 2 separate sessions. The first session, it was obviously learning the game. Our first time, we got through 4 scenarios, I think, and then the next time we played 6 in the span of like maybe 2 hours.
Yeah, so
it feels like for a legacy game. I mean, I've only played, as far as other legacy games go, would be, I guess, Gloomhaven and Charterstone before this. I know you've played Pandemic Season 1
Legacy.
Or Legacy Season 1, as well as Tainted Grail.
Yeah.
There might be some others, but of the ones I've played, this definitely feels like the least amount of time of any legacy game I've played, where like the least amount of time spent doing setup or reading rules or that kind of thing. It's like you finish one game, and then it's like, unless you're starting a new chapter, it's basically just like, okay, what's the new scoring condition for this game? Okay, clear the pieces, shuffle the deck, we're ready to play again.
Yeah.
And even the chapter, it's like you open an envelope, read a couple maybe new rules or something that's going to happen for those 3 scenarios, but overall it really feels like it keeps moving surprisingly quick for a legacy game, and that's definitely one of the most impressive things about it.
Yeah, and the fact that it, like the tiles come in 3 different colors, like Carlo mentioned, with the exact same shapes for each color, and you'll start off and they have different names, like, one represents residential, one represents commercial, things like that. But it doesn't really come into play at the start. And again, without spoiling anything, everything eventually matters. The colors of the tiles matter. The items that are on the boards matter. You're going to be sticking things onto your boards to change. You're allowed to now make your board uniquely different than your opponent's, which means you guys are tackling things a little bit differently. So that's where the genius comes in. It takes this very simple concept, and it just elaborates on it. It says, okay, you understand that? Well, now understand that in this framework. Oh, and you think you understand that? Well, now here's a rule that's going to apply for 3 games only that's going to drastically change the way you think about it.
Right.
And then we'll get you back to what you were, like, it's just, that's the genius of it, is not only do you not know what to expect with the whole legacy elements, but it never really feels like the things that's thrown at you are just for the sake of, like, oh, let's surprise them with legacy. It feels like in every chapter we were in, it almost each one could have been an individual game. If the game if the game had been released just as chapter 2, it would have felt like a complete game. If it had been released just as chapter 4, it would have felt like a complete game.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that's what I like so much about it, is that nothing feels tacked on, nothing feels like it's there just as a gimmick. It feels like these are all legitimate gameplay elements that are just changing your understanding of the rules of the game, right?
I also like it's not. I have a question for you that comes after this, but basically, I like how it's not that the game's not getting more complex every time. It's not just like, oh, now there's a new rule that we're adding. Like, it's changing scoring conditions, or sometimes it's even simplified. Like, we've had one, without spoiling anything, again, it just made it a shorter, simpler game where we didn't use many tiles, and it almost felt like a step back in a way, but it was cool to have that, because it made you second guess the way you'd played or not second guess, but you kind of had a pattern of the last 2-3 games maybe of amping up and taking up more and more space on the board, and now suddenly there's this wrench thrown in where we're only using a certain part of the board or something, where suddenly there's a restriction. It didn't just feel like, here's a new rule to add on, here's a new rule to add on. It kind of sometimes felt like it was restricting us and making us play it completely differently.
Yeah, for sure.
And what I want to ask you about that is, so out of the 10 scenarios we've played, do you think that you've enjoyed all 10 of them individually? Like, if they were, like you said, like, this is a game, chapter 1, its own set of rules, if they're boxed in the store as 10 separate games,
right, or expansions or whatever.
Exactly. Do you look back on them and think, like, well, I don't know if I'd play those ones again, or did you think they were all good? Is there one specifically, without saying what it was, but like, are there certain ones that stand out, or does it feel like they're 10?
There hasn't been any I've disliked, which I think is a testament to I'll speak for myself, what I think of the game so far, is that I haven't disliked any of them. Sure, there's been ones that I enjoyed more, and I think I noticed that more as not like, oh, that one was worse. I've noticed it more as this one was so much fun. But even the ones that I remember thinking, and again, I'm going to be careful in how I say this so I don't spoil it, but even the one I remember thinking, the one that ended up making the game a lot shorter, I remember thinking as we were starting, this is going to make it less interesting, or these ones might feel not as interesting to me. At face value, that's what I remember thinking going into it, but I was optimistic and positive. But I remember afterwards thinking that was almost the most interesting, because it was so restrictive compared to what I was used to, and it ended up being more fun trying to work within those restrictions. And all of a sudden, a lot of strategies it's hard to be careful not to spoil things. We should have picked a game that we didn't have to be careful about anything. But I remember thinking that, like, the way I had built my strategy, and I'll say this, and I'm going to allude to something, but I'm hopefully not giving anything away. But the game functions at the start that basically you can expect to get through every single card in the deck, or pretty much every card in the deck. So part of your strategy can be, at some point, this shape is going to come up. And at some point, I'm going to fit that shape into this spot I'm leaving open. At some point when the game restricts itself, that strategy doesn't work anymore. And all of a sudden, there's a very good chance you are not going to get through the whole deck. Yes. And so now your strategy of saying, I'm going to leave this gap open, becomes a gamble of, should I leave it open and bank on that piece coming up and potentially lose a bunch of points by leaving this empty? Or do I find some other way and then, kick myself when that shape does come up later? And that is what made those games so interesting.
Right.
What I thought was going to be restrictive and take away a lot of the fun by how much they were restricting us ended up being something that just was the exact curveball I think we needed at that point after having played 6 games with it a certain way. And I'm excited with still having 12 games left, what other curveballs are coming that are going to subvert that formula and just really make us look at this board. It's you're looking at a board and a rule set and having to change your strategy.
Something we haven't touched on yet that we should, just because it's such a key part of the game, we kind of both overlooked it, but is the aspect of the scoring in each scenario, basically. So, and this isn't a spoiler because this is a rule that's in the very first one, and it goes on at least for the first 10 we've played. But you basically start with 10 points at the beginning of the scenario. And anytime if you don't want to place the tile that comes up in the deck of cards, you can basically lose a point and set that tile aside, meaning you won't get to place it for the rest of the game, but you're not out of the game. If at any point you don't want to lose a point or you can't build anything anymore, you're out and you're basically done building, so the other player can keep going. So when Dylan was talking about that restriction of basically playing with rules that maybe don't allow you to place all your pieces or something, sometimes you're trying to make that decision of, is it worth placing this? Like you have some big awkward shaped piece, you can place it early on, you have tons of room on your board, but you think, is it worth it? Maybe I'll just lose a point and stay more flexible for later. But we've had games, both of us, where we like lose a point, lose another point, and then we're like, maybe we should have placed those ones before. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And it's that tough decision of where do you want to sacrifice something to hold off for something else that may or may not come up. And even thinking like, yeah, if I sacrifice a point, I might get that tile. But if that tile's not one of the next 3 or 4 that I draw, then that lost point was for nothing, and I might not even get the one I need anyways, and I might be out before I get to play. So it's like, every decision you try to make feels like there's a rabbit hole you can go down of like, but if I do this and then that, but then I got these ones left. So it just always, again, for just a board with some polyomino shapes, it looks so simple, but like just that little thing with the scoring and sacrificing your points and the shifted rules every time makes it, I'm just so impressed with what it does with so little.
Totally. So we're going to wrap this up because obviously we're going to have a full review coming. But before we do, I'm going to just put you on the spot. I'm going to put myself on the spot as well. Obviously, we're not going to give a score for this yet. This is our first impressions. I'll have that in the full review. But just based on what you've played so far, where do you think it would rank in your, out of the Knizia games that you've played, where do you think it would rank? I'll just say, is it one of the great Knizia games? Is it a good Knizia game? Or is it an okay Knizia game? If you had to put it into
just
one of those
3 categories?
Yeah, let's keep it simple because we got to save some for the review.
Okay. Well,
if you want to tell me it's your favorite Knizia game of all time, you can throw that out there too. But
no, it's definitely not my favorite of all time. But again, there's so many of his sort of highly acclaimed classics that I haven't played. I would definitely still put it in the, probably in the higher category, but even maybe in the medium one, just because of some of those, like Lost Cities is so good, right, and Battle Line and Blue Lagoon, which I got recently, which I've been loving. But honestly, considering it's his first polyomino and Legacy, I'd put it in the higher category. It's definitely one of the better, but it wouldn't be the best Knizia game I've played. But it's definitely one.
Yeah, I agree. It's not my favorite Knizia game, but it's definitely definitely my top 3. I'll put it that way. From what I've played so far, I haven't played all of his, obviously, and I'm sure that if I had, this would be a lot tougher for me to decide. But you know, I love games like El Dorado and Lost Cities. I think both of us love those 2 games a lot. So those are definitely in there. But this one for me is just one that like I cannot stop thinking about in terms of, you know, I love polyomino games. I love the simplistic games with that extra layer of strategic depth. This hits all the right notes for me. So that's my tease for the review. Is it's going to be a good review. It's just a matter of after playing the last 12, hopefully it can keep up the momentum.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't fizzle out.
Yeah, we don't want to have 10 great games, then 12 that just go downhill, which I don't think we're going to get. But we do have to play them all before we review it. So yeah, those are our early impressions on My City. Hope you enjoyed them. Hope you enjoyed the format. If you like this video, give it a like, give it a subscribe. Let us know what you think about the format. We're going to be doing a lot more of these conversational pieces and just us kind of talking more and then bringing up that side for you guys. So let us know what you think, and if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thanks. Take care.